Are you a real estate investor looking to sharpen your skills or a newbie looking to become one? You're in the right place. Welcome to Where Should I Invest? Real Estate Investing in Canada with your host, Sarah Larby.
Hey everybody, Sarah Larby here. Do you know what a BRRR stands for? I bet you think, well, it's a buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. This podcast, though, is a BRRR on steroids. It actually stands for, in this case, build, rent, refinance, repeat. And that's what my guest, Natalie Cloutier, has been able to do successfully with her husband. And this is probably one of my favorite podcasts when it comes to how much insight, how many tips, suggestions, breakdown of how to do this process. Thank you, Natalie. I mean, this was so insightful, and she really is able to share a ton about the processes. I mean, we could have kept talking for hours, but I'll tell you, this podcast is awesome. And she's been able to use the BRRRR strategy, buy, build, rent, refinance, repeat, and has done so successfully in the Ottawa region. And, I'll tell you, if you are interested in doing a building your own fourplex or duplex or single family property, this is going to be a great podcast for you. I hope you enjoy today's show, and don't forget to leave a rating and review. Until next week, guys, see you soon. Natalie, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good, Sarah. How are you?
Good. We were talking a little bit before this, and we were speaking in French. So you are also a francophone, bilingual as well.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your background and where you are from, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Ottawa, east of Ottawa, and my husband and I met in college. We studied architectural technology. So we have kind of a background in that, and we have a background in construction. So it's a very French community, but it's also very bilingual. So we do new builds. We invest in long-term rentals, but we build them from the ground up instead of doing the traditional BRRRR. So I still call it BRRRR, it's just that it's a 3R BRRRR instead of a 4R BRRRR, and it's basically just build, rent, refinance, repeat. So that's our strategy. It's kind of a different take on it, but we love it so far. It's definitely more labor intensive, I guess, but it's been very good to us. So that's our kind of summary of ourselves.
That's cool. It's like a BRRRR on steroids, right? You're buying your building, you're renting, and then you're essentially refinancing to repeat it.
Exactly.
I think that's really cool. So me personally, I actually have 3 pieces of land. I'm doing that on starting in February onwards. By the time this airs, we'll be in it. How did you get into the BRRRR on steroids?
How did I get into it? Yeah. So we actually started with a new build loan for our own home. So it's actually a lot easier to do this if it's for your primary residence, and it's a lot more difficult to get lending when it's for an investment property, obviously, because as it always is. But we did this, we weren't planning on getting into investing at all. So when we graduated from college, we bought a condo, like a basement condo, a really cheap thing, and 4 months in, we realized, okay, we are not condo people. Like, we want a garage, we want a yard. So, but we didn't have any money to ourselves. Like, we had just graduated. We didn't have any bad debt either, but we didn't have any money. So my parents kind of told me about this loan that they used to do back in their day, which is called an auto construction loan. That's in the French world. And I'm not sure if it's the same in English, because we use la Caisse des Jardins. So of course, very French institute, but they're very good with new build loans. And what they do with that loan is basically they will, let's say you get your plans drawn up for your house, and you'll get it valued, they'll get it appraised, and they'll say, okay, for easy math, the home is worth 100K. So they will lend you 80% of that value, and it's up to you to build it for that amount. So you basically have to replace your down payment with your labor. You have to be able to build that with your labor so you can save enough money to use the money that they're lending you. So excuse me. So basically it's a way to replace your down payment when you don't have any money. It's, like I said, it's a lot more labor intensive, but excuse me, but it's definitely a lot more lucrative. So that's what we did. We bought a piece of land, and we were able to get the loan for the land incorporated into the loan for the construction. They gave us a value for a house, and then they said, okay, we're lending you 80% of everything. And then they give it to you in progressive draws as the construction progresses. So we did, what did we do? We did, we obviously the project management is a big factor in it. And then we were able to do all our drawings because we studied in architecture. And then we did like all the drywall, all the finishings, the electrical. So the big stuff we hired out for, but the stuff that we could take on, we did it with the help with friends and family. And then we planned for a basement apartment. So we did a basement apartment to kind of house hack it and have that extra income coming in, because we were only like 19 or 20 years old at the time. We didn't make big salaries. We wanted to make sure we had enough income. So we planned it for that. And then after a year or so, when we had that apartment finished, we were able to kind of remortgage and get a HELOC. And then with the HELOC, we just kept going from there, and we were able to branch out into investment properties, but the same kind of concept.
It is a really cool concept. So essentially, just to, to take a step back. So Desjardins is also in Ontario, and I'm guessing they're probably in Canada as well. Now,
yeah.
You essentially find a piece of property, you put an offer on that piece of property, then you went to Desjardins and said, I bought this for simple math, like you said, $100,000. And they said, well, once you have a house on here based on your plans, you put your plans together based on your plans, your house is going to be worth 300. So do they give you 80% of that 300 then?
Yeah, exactly. So they can incorporate the loan for the lot into the mortgage of the construction itself. So if I remember the numbers to my house, I can give you a more concrete example. We bought the lot for 80 grand, and then the house was valued at 385. And so they kind of said, okay, well, we're going to be able to give you the 80 grand to buy your lot. And that was kind of part of the first progressive draw. It's a little complicated to explain, but once you're explained to, like, I'm not a financial person, so I don't have all the right terms. So they put that 80 grand kind of part of that first draw. So you're able to start the construction, and then you might have to put a bit of your own money down to get the ball rolling from there, and then to get like your permit and start digging and all that. But then once they go back and appraise to see how far you've gone onto the construction, well, then they kind of reimburse you and they pay you back, and then you keep going up until you're done with the construction. And hopefully, if you build conservatively enough, you're able to do it for the exact 80% that they give you, right? Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question well.
Yeah, no, that's good. So it sounds like a mortgage plus improvement, which a lot of lenders have that, right? So you're doing the renos, and then at each stage of the reno, they come and see you're at, a step further, then they do the draw, they give you the money. So you have to have a little bit of money up front, but it sounds like in this case, they probably loaned it to you to begin with, and then you went from there, which is awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
So that is a really cool concept. So you built this secondary unit, that property that you moved in, house hacked, built a secondary unit. Let's fast forward to today, and what does your portfolio look like today?
So today we sold a couple properties between this year and the last, just because the values had gone up and we wanted to kind of recycle that capital back into bigger projects. I think we are at 13 doors, but we're under construction with 2 fourplexes. So we have a couple duplexes, including our house, and then we BRRR'd like a traditional BRRRR last year. So that was our first renovation. 13 doors. We should be at 20 doors by the end of the year, by the time the constructions are done.
Awesome. So is it fair to assume that since you started and you got the HELOC, you've been essentially using the lender's money to be able to scale to what you have today?
Yeah, so kind of like a traditional BRRRR. Once we're done, they'll give you a construction loan during the construction, and then once you're done, you can kind of remortgage for the full value. Once you have your leases signed and everything, you can go back and say, okay, like it worked, the construction is done, it cost me this much to build, and now you can, because to kind of explain, when you're doing your appraisal, if anybody is familiar with the appraisal process, you have to go through the cost approach, the market value, and then the income approach, right? So they give you 3 different kinds of value. And usually what they'll do is that the bank will only give you 80% of the cost approach. So you're getting a lot less, but then once you've got your leases signed and they can kind of confirm the income approach, well, then you can go and get your mortgage for 80% or 70% or whatever the LTV that they're willing to give you for the full value. So for either your market value or your income approach, depending on the bank. So that's
essentially refinance And you can get, maybe your property, even though they said it might be worth 385, it could be worth 500 when it's all said and done and you've got leases in hand. So at that point in time, it just sounds like a regular appraisal.
Right. Right. So like if I can give you an example for one of the fourplexes we're doing now, this one was appraised, the market value was appraised at, I think about $1 million. And then they said, okay, so the construction, the cost approach is I don't remember the numbers exactly, but I'll just give you it was about 600 something. So they gave us 80% of that. And we're building it for that amount. So again, my husband's in there and I'm in there sometimes too, to do a lot of the work ourselves. And then when the construction is done, we've got our leases signed. Well, then they'll be able to give us the 80% of that initial market value loan of the 1 million. So then if we decide to go up to that 80%, which we probably won't because we don't want to be leveraged too high, we want it to cash flow well, we'll just go pull out what we need so that we can put it on to the next one and always kind of roll over that money into the next projects, maybe do bigger projects. We've also paid down a property to have a large HELOC on it so that we can always use our own HELOC to roll it over and make things go quicker, or to buy lots cash when the deal comes up. You can just kind of jump on it, not have to wait for the financing approval. So that's kind of how we're doing it. We're constantly rolling over that money into the next projects.
You're doing the repeat stage over and over, which is awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you always worked with the same lender then, or have you maneuvered around over the years?
No, so we've always worked with the Desjardins, and we've been told that they have the best type of loans. They can be a pain to work with though, like I'm not gonna lie, but so far we went to see another broker like in downtown Ottawa to see if she could do something better once, and she basically said, they are the best people, the best institute to work with for a construction loan. Not many banks are, because it is a bigger risk type of loan, right? They don't have anything to fall back on if something happens, if the construction doesn't go well. You can't really easily resell a half-built property. So it's definitely a bigger type of risk. So we've always dealt with them, but we have done a private loan once because we were building our first fourplex last year, and we had gotten approval from the bank. Everything was going well. And then the day before we were supposed to go buy our $40,000 permit, the bank came back and say, oh, wait a minute, I think there's something going on and we're not sure anymore. So it like halted our project. We had already started, like we had dug, we had poured the footings and everything. Well, we hadn't poured the footings, but the footings were ready to be poured as soon as we got that permit. So we kind of freaked out, and it pushed us outside of our comfort zone to go find a backup. So we found a private lender. We spoke to our lawyer and our accountant, and they kind of put us in contact with these different type of people. And we found someone who was willing to loan. And it took about 2 weeks, which was awesome because we had been 6 months in conversations with the KAIS to get that loan. So 2 weeks with the private lender, and we had our money, we were good to go. And that was when the KAIS came back and said, oh, you know what, we're fine. It was just a mistake. You're good to go. And we're like, yeah, well, it's too late now. Like too little, too late. So I definitely recommend private lending. It's just that it costs you a lot more in interest, right, during the construction. So you have to have that cash flow to support it.
Absolutely. I definitely think you have to have a backup because that situation is going to happen at some point with somebody else or something else. And it's just always important to have a backup so that you can close. And then worst case scenario, you go to Desjardins or whoever it was that you
exactly
at that point. But yeah, definitely it costs more money. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind if you're open to it, just walking us through, like a fourplex. It sounds like you're doing a few of these fourplexes. From the acquisition stage, like what you look for when you're purchasing the land. And let's just go through each of the, BRRR steps. And you can walk us through that if you don't mind. So let's start with buy. When you're looking at land, maybe just the last one or the last two that you've done, what are some things that you consider, that you suggest that somebody consider if they want to build a fourplex?
So definitely zoning is the first thing you got to check. It's very difficult to find zoning that allows for a traditional type of fourplex. However, in Ontario, what kind of pushes us over the edge, that gives us that advantage, is that they passed a bill a few years ago, I don't know how many years ago, but called Bill 140, where they accept accessory dwelling units. So that basically means that you can build like a semi-detached. So you just need to look for R1. Like it's different in every type of, in every municipality. I mean, in our municipality, I think it's R1 something. There's a letter at the end, and basically you just have to make sure that you can do R1, you can do a semi-detached, a side-by-side duplex, but you are allowed to add accessory dwelling units, or so basement units really in, and then that's how you kind of make it into a fourplex. So what that means is that to get that approved, you basically have to build the semi-detached, and you don't even talk about the accessory dwelling units. And then once you get your occupancy permit, then you can go and apply to do an accessory dwelling, like right after you're done the top units, you can go and start into the basement units. So that's what we look for. You got to make sure that you can do that type of zoning. And I'm pretty sure that's everywhere. That's a provincial bill that they pass. So everywhere in Ontario, you can do that. I don't know if they have that in other provinces though. So that's the biggest advantage of knowing that kind of bypass. And like the city knows too, most municipalities know that this is how you get around to building fourplexes. So that's what we look for. That's the first thing. And then of course, to make sure that the width of the lot, like you just have to do your research on zoning. And I always recommend to people to have a pre-consultation with the city. Sit with the city and ask them, if possible, even do it by email so that you have it in writing, but make sure that what you want to build, what you can, right? That it's allowed, because just last year, can give you an example, like we were getting, I guess, a little cocky, you know, we thought, oh, we did our research on the zoning, everything's fine, we'll buy this lot, we were going to build a triplex on it. So a duplex with a top and bottom duplex with a secondary dwelling unit. And turns out we missed a provision in the bylaw that said you can do an accessory dwelling unit, but only in a horizontal duplex, so a side-by-side, but not in a vertical duplex. We missed that. That was like another provision that was really far beneath the zoning. And we only found out after the whole triplex was designed, after the grading plan was done, and right while we were applying for permits. So we basically wasted months of work there, where we had to go back to the drawing board and redesign. We even had to apply for a minor variance to make a side-by-side fourplex work, because the lot was a little thinner. It was a little bit more narrow than a typical side-by-side duplex. Yeah, side-by-side duplex. So anyways, that was a whole lesson learned. So I always tell people, talk to the city, try to have it in writing, tell them, like, don't try to hide stuff, tell them your intentions of what you want to do, and then let them talk and see what they find on it. But make sure that they're okay with the intentions of your project and they have your support, or else it's not going to work, right? So
yeah, absolutely. So great advice on the zoning, and you mentioned drawings, and you mentioned planning. So, let's just say somebody checks the zoning and the zoning's fine. What would be the next step right afterwards to do?
So obviously make sure you can get financing, right? So what I usually do is have a budget prepared. You can either talk to, like, we have experience in this. So my husband was an estimator, and so like we know our costs by now. We can easily do a budget. But if you're new to this, you could talk to maybe a local builder and ask them to give you a budget of what it would cost. And you might have to pay his time to do that, but whatever, it might be worth it. Or you can just go trade by trade and get all of your quotes in for that project and have a budget ready, and then have an appraisal ready. So hire the appraiser, pay the fee. It might be $900, it might be $750, whatever. This is what you'll need to get a loan, whether it's private loan or traditional financing, whatever. They need to know, to make sure that your costs are going to be less than your value. So if you're in a market where you can buy a property for $150K, chances are it's not worth for you to build, because the property values are a lot lower. So you have to make sure that your cost versus value definitely work. So I always say you need to spend the time on getting your budget and all that done, get your appraisal done, get your design process, everything done, and then go see your lender, because you're going to shave some months off, because the lender is going to require all this information either way. And for yourself, you might as well know if this is a lucrative project or not. So, the thing is, it's difficult to do when you don't have a lot like if you already don't have the lot, and if you're making an offer conditional upon getting financing. What I usually say to do is that put in the condition on your lot that you need to get financing for the lot itself, not just for the project, or you could do it for the project too. But at least this gives, even if you have the cash to buy the lot, put in the condition and have the conversation with the institute, wherever you're getting your loan from, because it'll at least get the ball rolling. You'll be able to know what kind of stuff they're going to be looking for out of it. And then you'll be able to tell them what you want to build. So you just have to make sure that you can get it done. And in worst case, buy the lot and make sure that you can sell it. Again, just don't overpay for anything, especially these days in this market. People are overpaying, I find, for a lot of stuff. Although maybe not, maybe the market will keep increasing. Just try to keep the emotions out of it and stick to your numbers and stick to your gut. If you lose it because somebody else is willing to bid higher on it, maybe you should just let it go. So try to keep your numbers as low as possible, because if you spend too much on your lot, it's going to make a huge impact on your construction costs and your cash flow down the line, and it might not be a good deal anymore.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great advice. I mean, the other couple things I can think of is if you're like in an environmentally protected zone or like a flood zone or some of those things, like would be, in addition to seeing, could you build a fourplex on that? There's probably some things with the land that you've got to make sure that you're not, going into certain types of land. It's just, is there any feedback that you can give us on that?
So it's definitely a good point. Usually you'll have that kind of impact if it's a commercial lot, because a commercial lot, you'll have to do those environmental impact studies to get permits or whatever, even just to get financing. If the lot is residential, and if it's typically like, if it's in a good zone, like a residential zone, you should be fine. Plus you'll be able to kind of, you'll be able to know if you need any of that stuff just talking to the city when you're doing your pre-consultation with the city. So that's part of your condition when you're making an offer on the lot. It's to make sure that you can get a satisfactory building permit, and you basically just say, I want to build this. What kind of issues do you see with this, and what kind of hoops am I going to have to jump through? And that's where I say, let the city talk and let the city find out what would happen. So if you do have to do all those environmental studies and all those all that stuff, they will tell you, and then you'll know if it's worth it or not, because environmental studies are a huge cost, and definitely try to avoid those unless you're building a big, like a 12 unit or something. Then it might be worth it in your soft costs, right?
Yeah. And if phase one is different than a phase two environmental, right? So, I mean, once you get, like, if it doesn't pass phase one and you're spending, I don't know, 20, 25 grand doing a phase two, I mean, that's when you might want to say, this might not be worth it, depending.
Exactly. Yeah. And chances are, most of the times, if you're just sticking to small multifamily, any type of environmental study won't be worth it, your time and your money. So it's worth it, like I said, for anything like in bigger multi-units. We're looking at doing bigger multi-units too, and we know that this is the type of soft cost we're going to have to put up. But I've never had to encounter that for a small multi-family.
Okay. No, that's right, right? Because there's residential and there's commercial criteria.
Yeah.
So you're, in this market, you're doing this, you've got the background, you've got the education. Somebody that's starting out, who are some of the key people they need to have on their team to do a build? Like, so for example, when you're doing a renovation or you're doing a conversion, a BCIN designer is going to be great because they can do the drawings, the permits, they go to the city back and forth. Contractor, like, who are some of the key members on your team? You've got the lot, it's been approved, what do you do next, and who do you bring on to help you?
So I always say, like, the two people that help us a lot in our business is our lawyer, a real estate lawyer, and our accountant. So our accountant is kind of, he's the same, he does the same type of business as us. So he's also building fourplexes and stuff. So he's in there. He really knows what you need for tax purposes and how to do that stuff. There's also, I forgot to mention too, if ever you're doing your primary residence, if you're building, there's the HST rebate that you can go and get, which is a really good tool. That's what we use we use that money to do our basement unit. So again, that was due to our really good accountant that did all the paperwork for that and got us the max amount that we can get. So definitely get one of those. And so BCIN designer, like you said, definitely. I don't do architects. I find architects that's a different ballgame. That's a lot more expensive and complicated, mostly for larger scale projects. So a BCN designer is perfect. And then if you don't have a lot of experience in construction, it might not be a bad idea to talk to a contractor. Maybe even if you're planning on doing a lot of the work yourself, it would not be a bad idea to maybe ask to shadow that contractor for a few months to see how he does. And you might even have to pay him for his time, because you're he has to teach you, but it could be good, because jumping into construction, if you're planning on doing it yourself and you've never done this before, is definitely overwhelming. It's not too bad if it's your own home. I feel like you can figure that out, but when it becomes a fourplex or anything of the type, there's a lot of stuff to think about. There's a lot of stuff that could go wrong that you need to maneuver through. So so far, a lot of the people that we've spoke to that have never done this before usually hire a project manager, someone like ourselves, who can take on the project. They pay us a fee and we take care of the build. And then they obviously their costs are a lot higher because they have to pay the fee, but they shadow us at the same time. So they know what we do, they learn from it, and then they can take on the next one after that, maybe. So I would recommend that. And what else? If you don't have any rental properties, if you've never had rental properties before, get in line with the laws about that. Try to know that too before you get into it, because it's in Ontario, tenants are very protected. So you have to know your stuff. Yeah, I think that's all I can think of for now. If you've got that team down, you're pretty good.
So definitely the team, and that's on the buy side. And then when you start building, what are some of the things that we should be aware of? I mean, timelines, or, some of the stuff that maybe you've experienced recently that were surprises or aha moments. But if there's anything that you can share just about the building piece as it's going along.
Yeah, sure. So you mentioned timeline. So I can give you an example of timelines. Again, that depends greatly on if you have like a builder building for you, if you're doing it yourself. Obviously, it's going to be a lot slower if you're doing it yourself. And like a single family home can take 3 to 4 months, whereas our fourplex last year took us 9 months. But now the same fourplex we're building this year, we're shaving off at least 2 months off of it, because we've done it before, and it's, we're getting the hang of it. It's a lot easier. So timeline, it definitely depends. Sorry, what was your initial question?
Just during the build, right? Some of the things
right.
that we should be considering that maybe you didn't know when you first started, that you found out along the way of a project.
Yeah. So I always say your initial surprises are going to come from bringing up the structure. Like when you're digging in the land, you never really know what you're going to find. You could be like, we found rock where you have to blast it there. I'm sorry, I'm losing the name in my head, but they're like, the whole soil was basically rock. And yeah, we had to dig all of that out. We took out like, I think 4 triaxles of just rocks that blew the budget, obviously. So once you're kind of past that, once you've got your footings in and you've got your foundation poured, you're pretty much good to go. You never know what you can find in the soil. Also though, framing, you have to make sure that your plans are well drawn, that there are no, like, hopefully if you know construction, and if you don't know construction, have maybe a framer review them, make sure that there are no mistakes, that everything is clear, because if it's not, then you can have delays in the framing, you can have a lot of unexpectedness there, or your trusses could have, like in our last fourplex, we had problems with the trusses. They didn't ship them the right size, and we didn't notice it like on the truss package when they initially sent it to us. So, mistake on both parts there. So that kind of delayed us. But that's why I say you really kind of have to have, if you've never done this before, it's good to have someone there to coach you, because you can definitely run into stuff and you have to know how to deal with it. So I think that once you're all framed up though, you're basically coasting until the end. There's not much surprises there. So that would be, I think that would be the only thing. Also, if you're doing a fourplex where you have to do road cuts, so you have to cut in the road to get your services connected to the like the sanitary, the water and stuff like that, that can be a huge cost. And you might want to get an estimate on that before with an excavator and the city even, to see, because that could be 20 grand, like it can be a lot less, it could be 5 grand sometimes. Also hydro, connecting to hydro, if you have to add a pole or something, it can be like 5K a pole. The last fourplex we did cost us, I think, 18,000 in connection fees with hydro, whereas the one before that was 5K. So you try to get quotes for those and plan for the worst. So definitely have a good contingency budget in your construction budget. We always try to have like $40,000 in a fourplex, and then maybe half of that for like a duplex or something like that. You never know. But once all of that is done, there's no more surprises. The worst is done and you're just coasting until the end. That's where we are now with our 2 floorplexes. So we're happy, but the beginning is always a little more stressful.
Yeah. And how does the different seasons affect the build? Like, do you plan to start at a certain time? Because I mean, the ground is going to be harder in certain months. Like, do you have a strategy for that?
We always try to do it first thing in the spring. Because there's like this thing with the shipping of the material, the half loads is cheaper when it's in March until April or something like that, April or May. And then so if you can ship all of your wood and all your material on site during the half load season, then I think you're saving a whole bunch of money. I don't remember how much. So we try to do it then. It's just that it's very hard to plan for it because you never know if, like with our triplex that ended up being a fourplex. Well, if everything would have went as per plan, we could have done the triplex. Yeah, we would have started digging in May and coasted up until whenever it was done. But then we got delayed. So we ended up starting only in September of this year, or I think it was something like that. So it's hard because permit processes can be lengthy. You have to really know, and you have to and just getting your financing can take a while too. So we always try to plan for the spring and try to avoid winter because you'll have more fees with winter. You'll have they have to heat up for the cement, they have to heat up for the stone. So you have more costs for that. But at the same time, sometimes the trades are a little less busy in the winter, so you get better service. Whereas in the summer, they're crazy busy and you have to wait longer for them to come on site. So honestly, there's not much strategy there. We just try to do all our planning during the winter time and start first thing in the spring. The issue is that everybody else does that. Right. So it becomes like you're competing for time with everyone else. So in the end, you just kind of do what you can do. And we started our 2 fourplexes, because of the pandemic, mostly we couldn't get our permits until, I don't remember which month. I think it was August. So constructions didn't start until August, September. So now we're in it for the winter until it's done.
Yeah, I mean, definitely interesting, right? I mean, it's not like it's like an easy, do it all the time on this month, because you got, like you said, you got pros and cons to both. Have you ever looked at modular homes or prefab homes where, essentially they make it all and then they just, you get the foundation ready and then they come in and build it essentially in a matter of a couple of weeks? If that.
We have, it's just that it's not the same in terms of costs. Like we save so much money doing it ourselves, and by having construction accounts with your building supplier or whatever, you have a lot of discounts with that when you're a contractor. So it's just the cost wasn't worth it for us. Plus, when you start asking for a custom fourplex, it's just it becomes out of their scope and it becomes complicated. And so we didn't look enough into it to actually make a decision. We just know that the cost for us isn't worth it. Plus we've got all our systems in place, our construction processes are all done, that we don't really want to try something new. Maybe one day we will. I also don't know how much time you really do save, because yes, they'll get the structure done and they'll drop it off on site, but then you also have to tie it all together. You still got to get your trades in there to finish it up. Mm-hmm. I'm not convinced that it's for the extra money that you're going to spend. I'm not convinced you're going to save that much time.
Okay.
But I would have to do more extensive research to really give you a legit answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you seem like you've got something that flows really well, and it's smooth and it's quick and it works for you. So I mean, I do agree. I mean, I was looking at the cost of it, I think last before COVID happened and everything, and cost per square foot was very, very similar. But like you said, you still have to have somebody on site and tying it all together and that kind of stuff. But there's pros and cons for sure.
Yeah.
And there might be some companies that do it a little bit differently as well. But you've got something that's really well. So the next part of the podcast, I mean, we can keep talking about this for a long time. I'll have to have it back at some point because it's so interesting and you guys are doing so great. So congratulations. The next part of the podcast is our lightning round. So Nat, I'm going to ask you a series of 5 questions. You can give me the first answer that comes to mind. You ready?
Yep.
All right. Question number 1, what is your favorite podcast? It doesn't have to be real estate related.
So I'm not a huge podcast listener because I'm very visual, and listening to a podcast for me, I start multitasking and I don't always listen. But when I do listen to podcasts, I love Bigger Pockets because I just find Brandon Turner really interesting to listen to. And I love yours. not looking for extra brownie points, but I really do love yours because it's Canadian based and there's not a lot of them. So I listened to a few shows before in preparation for this one, and like I found a lot of really interesting information. So I'm going to keep listening to it.
Awesome. Thanks. Question number 2, what is your favorite real estate investing book?
I love the Don Campbell books. The one, the real estate cycle, the secrets of the Canadian real estate cycle. I love that one because it kind of put us in perspective of preparing for a market crash. So we kind of changed our whole portfolio and our structure around it when we read it last year. I think it was right before COVID. So we were happy. We thought things were going to crash, and we were happy we had read that book. And what other book? There's so many books that I've loved. I've loved the book by Brendan Turner again, the yellow book about managing rental properties. That one really changed my whole game on being a property manager and gave me systems. And so love that book. I could probably name you like 5.
Those are great books. I actually have that on my shelf somewhere in the yellow section.
Oh, really? Cool.
All right. Next question. Number 3, what do you do for fun when it's not anything about work or real estate?
We love to travel. Love to travel. Very, very depressed that we can't travel right now. But yeah, my husband, we've traveled all over, and we would go back in a heartbeat to anywhere. So that's what we like to do. Other than that, I would say just hang out with our family. We're very close with our families. So that's us. Boring, but
no, travel's great. Do you have a next place in mind when things open up again and this is kind of behind us, this pandemic, a favorite place that you want to go to?
Well, right now I just need warmth. So I want to go somewhere hot. I want to go, like, it could be Florida for all I care. I just want to go somewhere warm because I hate winter. So this winter is going to be definitely a very long one. But we were actually supposed to go to Paris in April when this pandemic started. So our trip got canceled. We were supposed to go like all around France, drinking champagne, eating cheese and stuff like that. So I would love to go back there, maybe just have that trip that we never had.
Yeah, no, very cool. We had a trip planned to either Spain or Italy this year as well. Like we were going to do a bigger trip, and it is what it is. It'll just have to wait a little bit longer. But
yeah, unfortunately.
Question number 4: if you lost all of your assets and your money tomorrow, how would you start again?
That's a good question. I've been asked that before too, and I never know what to say because I feel like the best way to get into any type of investing is house hacking. So I just don't know at what point I would be able to get like a loan on a house again and house hack, or else I would just try to find a way to like start an online business or start some type of business where I can get an income. But if I could somehow get into real estate again and house hack my way up again, that's what I would do.
All right. And last question, number 5, if somebody has $50,000 and they want to get started, how would you recommend they spend that money?
House hack. I really honestly think that it's the best way because real estate obviously is, to me, the safest kind of investment. And house hacking, my friend and I, we always call it house hack. It's like investing in real estate with training wheels. It's the best way to get started easily with like not a lot of money down, and you get to really live in it and learn it. So that would be my way of, if you have 50,000, get a down payment on a house hack it, recoup that money back and keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. Natalie, where can my listeners reach out if they wanted to know more about you or look at your coaching or your options that you offer?
Yeah, we are on Instagram, pretty much only Instagram. So our handle is at The New Build Couple. And we have a website too, thenewbuildcouple.com, although I haven't updated it in a while. But I'm also working on this kind of guidebook about new builds. I have a lot of questions about how to get financing and how to acquire deals. So I'm started working. I'm only in like my draft phase, but I'm hoping to have a book out, maybe hopefully within the next year.
Very cool. Awesome. And I always ask this question at the end. Any final last words of advice for the listeners?
Don't stop hustling, but at the same time, take a break every now and again because you can't always hustle, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah, it does actually. 100%. Awesome, Natalie. Thank you for being on the show. It was a pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to Where Should I Invest with your host, Sarah Larby. Make sure to listen in next time. We'll catch you on the next episode of Where Should I Invest?